One of the most recognisable and respected faces on British television, former Leicester, Tottenham and Everton striker Gary Lineker has been the BBC's main football anchor for over a quarter of a century. Making his professional debut for Leicester City on New Year's Day 1979 with a 2-0 win over Oldham Athletic, Lineker cultivated a striking partnership with future Arsenal legend Alan Smith. By 1985, his striking prowess became the talk of the First Division, and when high-flying Everton made an £800,000 bid, Lineker couldn't refuse. Narrowly missing out on the title to neighbouring Liverpool, Lineker's Everton tenure was a rewarding one, but a move further afield to Barcelona was now in the offing. Returning to England in 1989, Gary joined Tottenham on a contract worth £1.1 million, which climaxed in him winning his first silverware when Spurs won the FA Cup in 1991. Yet football was changing, and instead of seeing out his professional career in the newly formed Premier League, Gary joined Nagoya Grampus 8 until his professional retirement in 1994. His natural, amiable manner, coupled with an unrivalled knowledge of the sport, made Lineker an obvious pundit, but by 1997 he had also shown a flair for broadcasting, presenting the BBC's Football Focus. But a security threat at Aintree would unknowingly promote Gary to the leading anchor, and as they say, the rest is history. From 2004, Gary has been the main anchor of Match of the Day and remains the leading voice of live football from the BBC. I caught up with one of the leading voices in British sport to talk heroes, coverage and his recollections on an unprecedented career in broadcasting. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr Gary Lineker.
So, words we thought we'd never hear on the podcast. Gary Lineker, welcome to Beyond the Title.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. After taking some time out following your recent announcement of your departure from the BBC, what are the significant changes that you have observed surrounding attitudes towards football presentation during your tenure?
Well, things have gradually evolved and changed. Not just at BBC with Match of the Day, but obviously with the way the Premier League has taken foothold of the game and the amount of live football that's shown now, which has increased dramatically, certainly since I've played. So I'm not taking my time out just yet. I'm thinking I'll wait till the end of the season, and then I'll also do the FA Cup and the World Cup next season for the BBC, and then I think it's the right time. Yeah, things have changed over the years. I think the coverage has improved. I think technically things are much better. Obviously, the picture quality is way superior than it was when I started, even in television. It seems to improve. I mean, you only look back at an old recorded game that was 10 years ago and you can see the dramatic difference in the quality of the picture. I think the levels of punditry have significantly improved because it's a competitive business, and you've got to work really hard to improve and get better. So yeah, I think most areas of televised football have improved. There are a few things that I don't particularly like in terms of so many replays for everything, every foul, and it drives me a bit mad. But that's just personal preferences.
Football is now so all-encompassing and extravagant that it's easy to forget its regional significance. In your opinion, how integral is football in maintaining communities?
I think it's hugely important and beneficial to local communities in so many towns and cities right across the country. It's almost like a religion to so many football fans, and I can see the importance, significance, and I'm like that now. I'm a fan of football these days, and you go back to your roots of I did support in Leicester, so it's incredible. And when you get a bit of success, the impact on the towns or the cities is immeasurable. When Leicester won the league, for example, it was something incredibly special. Hundreds of thousands of people came out on the streets, and that togetherness. And so I think it's something that football should make sure it's one of the real priorities. The fan experience in grounds, because without fans, the game wouldn't be anywhere near where it is in the current day.
Josh's dad met his best friend in the football team which he played for when he was a teenager, and
Mm.
50 years later, they're still friends. Why do you think football has the power to forge such powerful and tight relationships?
That's a good question. I think it's part of the team thing, maybe of football. The that bonding element of even just supporting the same team um, can bring you together. It's to maintain a long-term relationship with someone, you've got to have a mutual interest, I think. And if that's football, then that mutual interest tends to stay forever. Because even if you support different teams and you've got a friendship, there's always something to talk about. There's always a topic for discussion, and that obviously leads the way. I guess that's the main reason. But I'm sure there are many others as well.
Hmm. Making your professional debut for your boyhood club, Leicester City, what were the significant pressures put on you as a young player at that time, and how do you think clubs have grown more responsible for the well-being of young players since?
Yeah, I think there's a very different probably experience these days in the way players are nurtured. And I think they are nurtured now more. I think there's a almost a bullying aspect of the way coaches and managers perhaps treated players back then. But it was seen as the norm. You if you didn't play well, you could easily get a bit of verbal abuse. And you had to be very strong to deal with that sort of stuff. Some people think that makes a man out of you. I'm not so sure. I think it was probably damaging to quite a lot of players because we're not all made of strong stuff and can deal with that sort of criticism that came your way. But it was tough. It was tough, but it still beats doing a real job even then. But it was, yeah, I think things have changed now. I think there's more of an awareness about players' mental health, which I think is a really good thing because, you know, you could tell when I played that I played with players that had massive issues going on, but they kept it all in because it was seen as a sign of weakness to share that sort of stuff. Where that's hugely changed now, and I think players can talk to people, and as we all know, I think talking is hugely important and beneficial when it comes to mental health.
Hmm. One of the most fascinating aspects that we love about football is watching the trajectory of a lower league of a player from often a lower league club
Mm.
to one of the top six. And I suppose you can sort of relate to that from when you joined Everton from Leicester. What's the pressure like of knowing that there's a big price on your head, and how do you go about living up to it? What advice could you possibly give to young players now who arguably don't live up to their price tag? And Josh is a United fan, so
Oh dear. Oh
it's got
dear.
extra significance.
Yes. Yeah, United have had their issues of late, that's for sure. I I don't know. I think each player probably deals with that in his own way. That pressure of the price tag, having to live up to it. I always thought of it as a compliment. If someone's prepared to pay that amount of money for you, I think it can really lift your confidence. And that's what if you lack a little bit of self-belief, well, that should give you self-belief. I don't think players generally think about the price tag that people have put on them when they're actually playing, and I don't think it probably affects them. I think players are either able to have a mental strength to deal with high pressured football clubs, which I think is more of a thing. I think when you play at a big club, the expectation is much bigger, and you have to be of a certain type to be able to deal with that. And until you buy a player, you don't really know how they're going to react. I was lucky. I was never phased by, not, moving to a big club like Everton, who were a brilliant side of the mid '80s, to playing for England as well, to playing at Barcelona. So I could take that in my stride, and I had the mental capabilities of dealing with it. I was lucky in that way, very lucky. And players that I've seen with probably more ability than I did couldn't deal with that side of it. And I think it's a hugely important part of the game. But yeah, dealing with, you know, transfer fees, and the more you pay, it's fine when you're doing well, but when you're doing badly, obviously the fans can turn against you more than anybody else. So, but the truth is, however much you pay for a player, until he gets in your team, in your squad, you don't know how they're going to react. And as we've seen from, sorry, Josh, your team, Manchester United, they've made a few mistakes in the transfer market, but nobody will be more upset than the players themselves about that. You know, it's tough when you're not living up to expectations and performing well.
Just hope we get a good score.
Josh said he hopes to just get a good striker. It'd be nice.
Yeah, that would help. You definitely need a good striker. We all need a good striker, Josh.
Like any sport, football's packed full of legends, heroes, and icons, and you got to work with your fair share. How important were people like Sir Bobby Robson and Terry Venables to the development of top-flight football in this country?
Hugely beneficial. Two great people, two kind people as well. You know, we talked about some of the old school management techniques, but they were more of an arm around the shoulder type people, but tactically both, you know, very good. Terry Venables in particular. Bobby was perhaps more of a people's person, and motivated that way. Terry Venables was a tactician, and they helped me a lot, but they did great jobs for the country as well. Both of them obviously going very close to winning major tournaments, losing on penalties in semi-finals, both against Germany. In 90 with us, and then in 96 with Terry Venables' team. So, you know, great people, great coaches, and I miss them both. I miss them both to this day.
Yeah.
Josh said, what do you think would have happened if we'd beaten Germany in Euro 96?
They'd have won the final, I think. We'd have won the final. I think, and this, I think the same in 1990 when we lost it exactly the same way. I think we'd have gone on, but you never know. You can't be sure. But you know, Bobby Robson and Terry Venables would have been national heroes. And I mean, if we'd have won the World Cup, it's the only probably thing I look back on my career and have one regret is that it's not, probably regret's the wrong word. Disappointment about my career was to be that close to a World Cup final and the chance of footballing immortality, that close. It was a tough one to take, that was.
Nowadays, it's easy to get a temperature of those players who will naturally fall into punditry, thanks in part to social media and rolling sports news channels. But 30 years ago, the broadcasting landscape was very different. What was it about punditry that interested you?
Well, I was always interested in journalism. When I was a kid growing up, I used to go to Leicester's games and write match reports just for myself for a bit of fun. So I was, even as I made my way in football, I always thought if I didn't make it in football that I want to be a all sport journalist, because I loved other sports as well, but football primarily. So I think it was natural that during my career, I never saw myself as a coach. It didn't appeal. But you know, football on television started to grow and become more popular during my time as a player. And I thought if I could get a career in that. So I used to, you know, wrote columns for the Observer, and then I did lots of radio, because I wanted to go into the media, and I actually wanted to go and present rather than just be a pundit. I started with punditry, but I just thought, as a person that's played at the very highest level, you know, in World Cups and European Championships and big football clubs, I thought would put me in a unique position amongst fellow football presenters that would give me an edge, and a niche that would hopefully give me some sort of longevity in the role. And that's obviously what happened. Now, it wasn't easy at the start. It took me, you know, first couple of years, I remember presenting Football Focus. There were times when I was driving home thinking, I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to crack this. But eventually, with a bit of perseverance and effort and a bit of good fortune and patience from my bosses, that I got to a position where I understood the environment. I was comfortable in it. And then you become yourself and people decide whether they like you or not.
Mm.
Oh, we could only have that.
Josh said, before we ask you the next question, it's probably important to say that Josh is somewhat of a TV anorak. So, in 1997, the legendary Des Lynam was at Aintree for the Grand National, which was interrupted by a security threat, which ultimately resulted in you presenting both final score and match of the day.
Yep.
Looking back, how pivotal was a moment like that to the trajectory of your career?
It's a good point. I remember it well. I was just sitting in a chair, and I was in the days I was doing Football Focus, but and then there was the bomb scare at Aintree, and there was one producer guy in the building, and he came in. He went, "Oh, they've been evacuated from Aintree, so Des can't do the rest of the show. So you're going to have to do it, Gary." I went, "What, me?" And they went, "Well, you're the only presenter in the building." So I went, "Okay." I said, so I went and put a tie on, and I sat there, and it was a little bit hairy and scary because I'd never, they had a thing called the Vidi prompter then, and where all the results came through. So I had a quick lesson in that just before I went on air, and then I'd kind of busted it. And it wasn't too bad, but it could have gone horribly wrong because, I was having to fill on my own. I had no guests, no one to talk to. I think I said it was a sad day for sport about 400 times, but apart from that, it wasn't too bad. But it was pivotal because it could have, it wasn't brilliant, but I did okay. But it could have been one of those things where I collapsed and it might have had a detrimental effect on my career. But I think it also meant that I think I knew after that I could deal with anything that was thrown at me. So it was okay in the end.
Sport played a dominant role in the BBC, and for many years it was the home of Football Focus, Final Score, and Match of the Day. That was at Television Centre. How important was having a hub like that to executing the coverage?
Well, it's always good to have a good base. I mean, we're not in obviously London anymore. We moved up to Manchester in 2011, I think now, 14 years ago. Wow, it's gone quick. But again, you've got that hub of studio and backroom staff, and there's a lot of people that are involved in a show like Match of the Day. It's not just the three of us turning up and directors and producers, but there's a lot of people, the people that do the match edits and the people that help the guys with the technicalities of doing their punditry. It's a big team. If you ever see the titles coming through of all the names at the end of the season, which we do the last day, there's a lot of people involved. Commentators, reporters, all sorts of people from runners right up to top producers. So it's very important to have that hub and that togetherness. And that team thing that we get in football on a larger scale to bring to you a decent television program.
Beyond sport, you've never been one to take yourself that seriously. And in 1995, you joined David Gowan, Nick Hancock as team captain on They Think It's All Over. How important was that for people to see a different side to you?
Well, it was a lot of fun actually. It was great to do, and it was. At that stage, I was seen a little bit as a goody two shoes and a bit, probably a bit dull. Probably still a bit dull, but there you go. But I went on on that show, and it wasn't a deliberate plan to change the image, but certainly to make it a little bit edgier and to show that could have a bit of fun. And it was great. I think we did 15 series before they actually dropped Nick Hancock and David Gower. So I went because I said I'm not carrying on without those two. So but it was a lot of fun. It was a real giggle, and it's hard, because we were in a studio and suddenly you've got a live audience. It's not like a live audience in football where I kind of felt I knew what I was doing on the field, but this was a comedic world with proper brilliant comedians, and you're trying to be funny, and it was difficult, but we got a bit of help along the way, and I think it was important, and did help my overall image in terms of presenting, and I think it definitely helped. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Josh said he used to love Phil the Sports.
Bill the Sportsman, yeah, we had some giggles with that. That was funny.
Right, in 2001, the BBC lost the rights to broadcast highlights of the Premier League. Why do you think Match of the Day has been so successful as opposed to its many ITV incarnations?
Well, yeah, we lost it for 3 years in 2001, as you say, and I'd just taken over as main presenter, so it was a real blow at the time. And they experimented with it. They put it on as an early slot. They had the tactics truck thing, and I think if something has to change, like even if it's changing the channel, I think it's very important not to make too many changes. I think the public can cope with something, going to another channel. But then to change its time and change the whole ethos of the show in terms of doing things from tactic trucks and that, I think you have to be a little careful, and it just didn't work for them. And I think since then BBC have maintained the rights. I think it's almost become a national institution in many ways. It's definitely the flagship sports program on BBC television. I'm proud to have hosted it for 25 years. And I think that it's a staple diet of a lot of people in this country that don't have Sky, that don't have TNT, that don't have Amazon, that can show all the games. So I think there's about half the country without those streaming services. So I think it's really good for us, really good for the public to have a program that they can trust, and it's been going for 60 years now, and it's still very, very popular, still doing really big numbers, and I think that's because people can trust it.
And I calling and
Yeah, we got Sky and TNT. We watch probably every game that's on TV, but we still watch Match of the Day and Match of the Day 2 every week. It's and obviously you've not got U2 as the song at the beginning of the show, which probably podcasts are now pretty big business, and the podcast landscape has completely changed since we started Beyond the Title in 2016. What made you want to create The Rest is Football?
Well, I've got a podcast business, and we had a lot of podcasts, and they were all doing really well, and it seemed a bit mad that we didn't have one on football. So I thought we should probably start one. It was just really getting the right people, because I think the chemistry in podcasts between the hosts is imperative, that it's good. So I knew I wanted Alan and Micah, and have eventually persuaded them after. Actually, it was during Qatar World Cup, after a few late nights and one or two drinks, that I taught them into it. And I also thought that in football, there's a lot of. I mean, also the reason was there's a lot of podcasts on football, a lot, and there's some very good ones. But they're all a lot of them are quite earnest, and then a lot of them are very much kind of clickbait stuff. And I thought I wanted to do something serious, but also to have fun in it. So a mixture of the two, and to have our experiences of footballers, which I think gives us that edge as well as being broadcasters. So it was, I knew that it was a kind of lot of competition out there, but I felt that if we could give them something slightly different, and the difference really is that we give it more regularity. So we'll do 3 episodes a week, and people have bought into it, and it's obviously it's the biggest sports podcast in the UK now by quite a distance. So I'm really chuffed, and mainly because obviously I enticed Alan and Micah to do it, and they love it now as well. So it's great to do.
Looking back at your career, what's your proudest achievement?
At my football career or my
Both, I suppose.
either? Well, I actually probably a bit more proud of what I've done in broadcasting than possibly football, because I think I was born to be. I always say I was born to be in the box, not on the box. And I had to work really hard at television. I had to work hard at football, but it came naturally, whereas television didn't come naturally. It took a lot of hard work and effort and determination and studying and stuff of other people and how they do it, and eventually I got there. So probably that, probably the fact that I made it to the top in broadcasting.
Yeah. Oh, so, yeah. Yeah.
Justin, how do you think the sort of next era of footballers come broadcasters are going to benefit from having someone like yourself who's done it for successfully for 25 plus years?
Well, hopefully they'll. I don't know. It's hard for me to say, isn't it? Benefit from my experience, but I'm always here to guide people if they want guidance, and once quite a few do. So I've tried to help people that way. I hope, like I did with Des Lynam when I took over, I spoke to Des quite a lot. Also, not copied or mimicked, but in my own way, took on board some of the things that he would do. Try and have a laugh, try and do a fun closing line or a fun opening line. Don't be afraid of trying to be silly occasionally. So there were a lot of things I took on board from him, and if I were coming into it now, I'd look at people like me and Gabby Logan and Mark Chapman and whoever else, and look at them and see how they do it, to learn from that. On the punditry side, of course, there's a lot more players that I think are interested in doing that side of the game now than perhaps when I played. But again, you've got to work at it.
So the last question, what's next for Gary Lineker?
Well, slow down a little bit. And do you know what I'm looking forward to? I haven't really had a weekends in my life as an adult. I've always played football at the weekends, and now I've broadcast football at the weekends. So I'm looking forward to a few Saturday nights, going out for dinner and things like that. But professionally, I've got a big podcast company, and I think takes up quite a bit of my time. It will probably take up a bit more now, and it's really exciting. It's a lot of fun, and we're doing pretty well. So I think mainly that. I don't think I'll probably do much television. Hopefully, I'll be in a position where I can just pick and choose things that I quite fancy doing. But so podcast world really, I think mainly.
Fair enough. Do you think you'll miss it?
No, and I know that sounds strange, but I've never really missed things. I didn't miss playing after I finished. It felt like that part of my life was over, and I think I was helped a little bit by having the last 2 years. When I was in Japan, I was permanently injured. It was very frustrating. I just wanted to get on and do something else. Then I took to golf for years, and I was obsessed with golf. And then I couldn't really play it anymore. And I thought, so I hurt my wrist, and then I hurt my back, so I stopped playing. And I thought I'd miss it, but I didn't at all. So I think this will be the same. I absolutely loved doing it for all that time. But I know me, and once it's finished, I'll still watch it. I'll still watch it, but I don't think I'd miss doing it. No, no. I'm a bit strange like that, Josh.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Absolute pleasure,
Well,
and keep up the good work, Josh.
Thank you very much.